Get out, this is no place for beggars. Cassandra Beck spat these cruel words right at Malik Reynolds in front of dozens of wealthy guests. Malik held his daughter Chloe's hand, hiding his pain to protect her innocence. He only wanted to quietly test the service at his own hotel, the Vantage Horizon. But now he faced cold handcuffs from Seattle police, deep-rooted racism, and cruel stares from rich people under the beautiful dark marble pillars. This painful clash was a tough test for the management system he trusted. Can this single father change everything with his power as CEO, or will deep prejudice bury the truth before it can shine? It was that same cruelty from Cassandra that started the whole nightmare. But to understand it, we need to go back 36 hours. The office sat on the 88th floor of a tall Chicago tower. Outside, the wind pushed hard against the glass. It was 2 degrees, and snow dusted the rooftops below. Inside, the heater hummed low and steady, ticking every few seconds like a slow, patient heartbeat. The air smelled like fresh coffee and warm paper. Somewhere down the hall, a printer clicked and whirred, spitting out one page after another. Malik Reynolds sat behind his desk, reading a report. His company, Atlas Horizon Group, had just closed its best quarter ever, $94,218,000. He did not smile. He just nodded once and set the paper down. Malik was 38 years old. He had a strong jaw and tired eyes. His hands were rough from years of early work, long before the money came. Tonight, he wore a gray hoodie from a discount store. It cost $25. His jeans were faded at the knees. His desk told 2 stories at once. On one side sat a sleek laptop and a stack of contracts worth millions. On the other sat a small, crooked drawing of a son, taped up by tiny hands. Across the room, his daughter Chloe played on the carpet. She was 7. Her mother had passed away 3 years ago. Chloe still carried an old teddy bear everywhere. Its name was Barnaby. One ear was torn and stitched back with mismatched thread. The carpet under Chloe's knees was soft and thick, but the window beside her felt cold to the touch. She pressed her small palm against the glass and watched her breath fog up a tiny circle. Malik knelt down and picked up a scattered puzzle piece. "Time to put these away, sweet girl," he said softly. Chloe yawned and hugged Barnaby tighter. "Can Barnaby help too?" "Barnaby always helps," Malik said, and for a moment his tired face softened into something warm. He believed something simple. A person's worth lives inside them, not in the clothes they wear. He wanted Chloe to grow up knowing that truth in her bones. So even now, with 18 luxury properties under his name, he still chose the plain hoodie over anything flashy. At exactly 10:45 that morning, the office door swung open. His son Boyd walked in fast. He was the company's chief legal officer, a sharp man in his 50s, with silver at his temples. He dropped a thick folder on Malik's desk. "You need to see this," Harrison said. His voice was tight. Malik opened the folder. 45 pages stared back at him. Financial reports. Strange numbers. All from one hotel. The Vantage Horizon. Seattle. Bought 4 months ago for $78 million. "Look at this line," Harrison said, tapping a page. $142,000 hidden under emergency maintenance. That money went somewhere. We just don't know where yet. Malik's jaw tightened. He flipped to the next section. Customer reviews. 1 star after 1 star. Most were anonymous. All told a similar story. Guests with darker skin, or guests who looked like they didn't have much money, were turned away at the door. Some were followed by security. Some were simply ignored. "This is happening at my hotel," Malik said quietly. His voice barely rose, but something in it had changed. Harrison nodded. "The old management team is still running the place. We haven't replaced anyone yet. If this is true, it's been happening for years." Malik stood and walked to the window. Chicago's skyline stretched out below, cold and gray. He thought about the version of himself who used to sleep in his car back before any of this. He thought about how easy it would be for people to forget where he came from. "I need to see it myself," Malik said. not through a report. In person. Harrison frowned. You mean send an inspection team? No, Malik said. I go. Dressed like this. With Chloe. Harrison's eyes widened. Malik, you're worth more than most Fortune 500 companies. You cannot just walk into your own hotel pretending to be a stranger. If something goes wrong, that's exactly the point, Malik cut in. If something goes wrong for a man who looks like me, in a hoodie, holding his daughter's hand, I need to know. Because if it happens to me, it's happening to guests every single day. Harrison rubbed his forehead. Let me send a professional audit team instead. Trained people. This isn't your job anymore. Malik looked over at Chloe. She had fallen asleep on the couch, Barnaby tucked under her chin. He watched her chest rise and fall, slow and peaceful. Doubt crept into his mind. What if they ran into real hate? What if Chloe saw something that hurt her? He almost changed his mind right there. Then Chloe stirred. She rubbed her eyes and looked up at him. Daddy, are we still going to see the ocean? Something in Malik's chest settled. He smiled and brushed her hair back. Yes, baby. We're going to see the ocean. He turned back to Harrison. We leave tomorrow. Book 2 seats. Nothing fancy. Harrison sighed, but he knew that tone. It meant the decision was final. I'll have a car ready. And Malik, keep your phone on you. Every second. The next afternoon, their flight landed at Seattle-Tacoma at exactly 1:12. Gray clouds hung low over the runway. Malik held Chloe's small hand as they walked out into the cool, damp air. Salt and rain hung heavy in the wind. Somewhere nearby, a gull screeched twice and flew off toward the water. A yellow taxi waited at the curb, its paint chipped along one door. The driver leaned out. He was an older black man, maybe close to 70, with white hair and deep lines around his eyes. His hands looked strong on the wheel, marked by decades of gripping and turning. A small wooden cross swung gently from the mirror, tapping the glass with every turn. Where to, young man? The driver asked. His name tag read Frank. The Vantage Horizon, Malik said, sliding into the back seat with Chloe. Frank glanced at them in the mirror. He noticed the hoodie. He noticed the worn teddy bear in Chloe's arms. Something in his face grew thoughtful. That's a fancy place you're headed, Frank said, as he pulled into traffic. Cold wind off, that bay, but let me tell you something colder. Malik met his eyes in the mirror. What's that? The way some folks behind those glass walls look at people like us, Frank said. His voice wasn't bitter, just tired like a man who had seen the same story too many times. Keep your head steady in there, and watch over that little one. Malik nodded slowly. The words settled into him like a stone dropped in still water. Chloe leaned forward between the seats. Mr. Frank, do you know if the ocean is cold? Frank chuckled, the sound warm and easy. Cold enough to wake you right up, little one. But it's beautiful too. Don't let anybody tell you different. Chloe smiled and sat back, hugging Barnaby a little tighter, already imagining the waves. When they reached the hotel, Frank refused the extra tip Malik tried to hand him. Just get where you're going safe, he said, and drove off into the gray afternoon. Malik stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up. The Vantage Horizon rose above them, its windows made almost entirely of glass. Somewhere behind that glass, a hotel that carried his name was either honoring people or breaking them. He took Chloe's hand. Ready, sweet girl? She nodded, hugging Barnaby to her chest. Together, they pushed through the heavy brass revolving door. The lobby swallowed them in light and marble. Charcoal gray columns rose to a ceiling covered in glittering chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of Puget Sound, choppy and silver under the clouds. The air smelled like fresh lilies and expensive candle wax. Somewhere near the bar, ice clinked softly against crystal glasses. Malik's sneakers made a faint squeak against the polished stone. Malik felt small in the space, and he knew that feeling was exactly the point. It was designed that way, designed to remind ordinary people they didn't belong. He had walked into 100 boardrooms without blinking, but something about this lobby made his chest feel tight. He had no idea yet how much colder things were about to get. He walked to the front desk. A young woman named Sarah stood behind it, her name tag polished and precise. Malik gave a small, polite smile. "Checking in," he said. "Reservation under M. Reynolds." Sarah's eyes moved over his hoodie, over his faded jeans, over Chloe's scuffed sneakers. Her smile stayed on her face, but her eyes had already made a decision. "One moment," she said, and typed slowly, too slowly. She frowned at the screen, though nothing seemed wrong. She glanced toward a side hallway, as if waiting for someone. That was when the sound started. Heels striking marble. Sharp. Steady. Getting closer. A woman rounded the corner. She had golden hair pulled back tight, and a cream pencil skirt that fit like armor. Her eyes swept across Malik and Chloe in half a second, and her face hardened. This was Cassandra Beck, general manager of the Vantage Horizon. "Excuse me," Cassandra said, stepping between Malik and the desk. "Can I help you with something?" "I'm checking in," Malik said calmly. "My reservation should be right there." Cassandra's eyes flicked down at Chloe, then back up. Her mouth curled, not quite a smile. "This lobby is for hotel guests only. I don't think you understand where you are." "I do understand," Malik said. His voice stayed even. "I have a reservation." "Get out," Cassandra said louder now. Guests nearby turned to look. "This is no place for beggars." The words hit the room like a dropped glass. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Chloe's small fingers tightened around her father's hand. Somewhere behind them, a spoon clinked against a saucer, then went silent. The air conditioning hummed on, steady and cold, filling the space where voices used to be. Malik's jaw locked. A vein pulsed once at his temple. Heat rose up his neck, but he looked down at Chloe's frightened face, and he swallowed every word he wanted to say. "Ma'am, there's a misunderstanding," he said quietly. "If you check the system, I don't need to check anything," Cassandra snapped. "I know exactly what I'm looking at." "Security." Two guards stepped forward. Cassandra pointed at Malik like he was something spilled on the floor. "Escort this man and his child off the property. Now." Chloe's lip trembled. A tear slid down her cheek. She pressed her face against Malik's side, hiding from the stares of the crowd. Malik knelt down to her level, keeping his voice soft. "It's okay, baby. I've got you." But inside, something in him was breaking quietly in a place no one else could see. One young security guard hesitated near the edge of the crowd. His name was Leo, 22 years old, only 1 week into the job. He watched Chloe's tears fall, and something in his chest refused to stay still. Leo broke away from the others. He crouched down in front of Chloe and held out a small bottle of water and a chocolate bar. "Hey, it's okay," Leo whispered. "I'm right here." Chloe looked up at him, startled, then gave a tiny, shaky nod. Cassandra's eyes narrowed at Leo. "Get back to your post," she hissed. Leo stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly, but he didn't run. He stayed close, watching. Outside, sirens wailed. Blue and red lights bounced off the glass windows. Guests pressed toward the windows to watch. Malik felt his stomach drop. 2 police officers pushed through the revolving door. The lead officer, a heavy-set man named Officer Miller, walked straight toward Malik, with his hand already near his belt. Cassandra rushed to meet him. "Officer," this man forced his way in. "He's using the child to beg. He threatened my staff." None of it was true, but Miller didn't ask questions. He grabbed Malik's arm and spun him toward the nearest marble column. "Hands where I can see them," Miller ordered. The cold stone pressed against Malik's cheek, rough and freezing against his skin. Metal cuffs clicked around his wrists, tight and biting. His knuckles turned pale, where his fingers curled shut. For one strange second, the whole lobby went silent. A grandfather clock near the elevators ticked once, twice, filling the space where no one dared to speak. Chloe screamed, "No, please don't take my daddy. He didn't do anything wrong." She grabbed at the officer's jacket, small fists pulling with everything she had. Leo stepped forward to help her, but Miller shoved him hard. Leo stumbled and fell against the floor. Cassandra stood a few feet away, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at her lips. She turned to a nearby employee. "Someone get that dirty toy away from the girl. Throw it out." Malik heard that. Something inside him went very still and very cold. He thought about screaming out his real name right then. He thought about shouting that he owned every marble tile beneath their feet. But he didn't. Instead, he thought about evidence, about proof that couldn't be denied or twisted later. He looked straight into Cassandra's eyes. His voice came out low and steady. "Ms. Beck, I would think very carefully before letting that officer close those cuffs." Cassandra laughed, sharp and cruel. "Is that a threat?" "No," Malik said. "It's a warning." At exactly 3:40 in the afternoon, a black Mercedes S-Class pulled up outside the hotel, tires screeching slightly against the wet pavement. The door flew open before the car fully stopped. Harrison Boyd stepped out, his coat flapping in the wind. Behind him came 2 legal assistants and 3 investigators from the Washington State Police Oversight Bureau. Harrison marched through the revolving door like a storm given legs. "Take those cuffs off Malik Reynolds right now," he shouted, his voice echoing off the marble. The lobby fell silent. Every head turned. Officer Miller froze, his hand still on the cuffs. "Who exactly are you?" Harrison pulled out a leather folder and slapped it open. Inside said a deed of ownership, a business registration, and Malik's passport, side by side. "This man," Harrison said, pointing at Malik, "is the sole owner of Atlas Horizon Group. He personally purchased this hotel 4 months ago for $78 million. Every employee in this building works for him." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Whispers spread fast, guest to guest, employee to employee. Cassandra's face drained of all color, pale as the marble beneath her heels. Her hand shook so badly the tablet slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Miller's hands shook as he unlocked the cuffs, fumbling twice before the metal finally clicked open. Malik rubbed his wrists slowly, saying nothing for a long moment. While Cassandra's breath came fast and shallow, Malik stood perfectly still. His shoulders stayed square. His eyes stayed calm, like a man who had already known how this story would end. Chloe rushed forward and wrapped both arms around her father's leg. Malik knelt down and pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You said this was no place for beggars," Malik finally said, his eyes locked on Cassandra. "You were right about one thing. It's not." Cassandra's knees buckled. She dropped down in front of him, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Reynolds, please, I only wanted to protect the property. I didn't know who you were. It was a mistake, I swear it." "You didn't make a mistake," Malik said quietly. "You made a choice. Every single time you looked at someone and decided they didn't belong, that was a choice." Behind them, Officer Miller tried to step backward toward the door, hoping to slip out unnoticed. One of the investigators stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Not so fast," the investigator said. "We have questions for you two." Malik turned to Harrison. "Lock down every computer in our office. Now, before anything gets deleted." Harrison nodded and moved fast, 2 assistants trailing behind him toward the manager's office down the hall. Inside that office, the real story finally came to light. Over 2 years, Cassandra had quietly stolen $342,000 from hotel funds. She hid it under fake maintenance costs and false vendor payments. 15% of that stolen money had gone straight to Officer Miller and 2 other officers. In exchange, they ignored her complaints, silenced her critics, and helped remove any guests she decided didn't fit the hotel's image. It hadn't started with hate, not exactly. It had started with greed, and greed had built a system that fed on prejudice to survive. One investigator pulled up old security footage on a small laptop. The screen showed months of guests turn away one after another, always for the same quiet reasons. A missing name on a list, a wrong kind of jacket, a skin tone that didn't match the brochure. Harrison watched the footage in silence, his jaw tight. "How long has this been going on?" "Longer than anyone wanted to admit," the investigator answered. Nobody above her ever asked questions. The complaints just disappeared into a folder nobody opened. Harrison closed the laptop slowly. He thought about how close this truth had come to staying buried forever, hidden behind polished floors and pretty chandeliers. Malik walked back into the lobby a while later. The golden afternoon light spilled through the tall windows, catching the edges of the marble floor. He stood tall in his simple gray hoodie, and somehow, in that moment, he looked more powerful than anyone in a suit ever could. "Cassandra Beck," Malik said, his voice carrying across the silent lobby. "You are terminated, effective immediately. Every stolen dollar will be traced and returned. The state investigators will handle the rest." Cassandra didn't argue. She simply nodded, defeated, as two investigators led her toward the door. Officer Miller was placed in handcuffs of his own, the same cold metal that had bitten into Malik's wrists less than an hour before. The other corrupt officers were named soon after, following the trail Harrison's team had uncovered. Malik turned and found Leo standing near the wall, still shaken, his uniform slightly torn from the fall. "Leo," Malik said gently. Leo straightened up fast. "Sir, I'm sorry. I only started last week. I didn't mean to overstep." "You didn't overstep," Malik said. "You knelt down for a scared little girl when everyone else looked away. That matters more than any rule in this building." Leo blinked, unsure what to say. "Starting tomorrow, you're the new floor supervisor," Malik said. $65,000 a year. You'll help me find more people like you. People who see kindness as the real job." Leo's eyes filled with tears he tried hard to blink away. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." Malik nodded once, then knelt down beside Chloe, who still clutched Barnaby tight against her chest. "You okay, sweet girl?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her cheeks were still damp. "Is it over now?" "It's over," Malik promised. "It's going to be better now. For everyone who walks through that door." In the weeks that followed, Malik created something new. He called it the Dignity First Fund, named quietly after Chloe's own courage that day. The fund trained every employee across his 18 hotels, teaching them to treat every guest, rich or poor, with the same simple respect. He also personally reviewed every complaint filed in the past 3 years across his properties. Dozens of guests received apologies. Some received refunds. All of them received the truth about what had happened and why it would never happen again under his name. Word spread fast through Seattle, then further about the CEO, who wore a plain hoodie and still owned the building he was thrown out of. Some called it a lesson in humility. Others called it proof that dignity has no price tag. One rainy Tuesday, Malik asked his driver to find an old yellow taxi with a chipped door. It took 2 calls and 1 lucky guess, but Frank showed up outside the hotel just after noon. Frank stepped out of his cab, squinting up at the glass tower. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, shaking his head slowly. Malik walked out to meet him, hand extended. "You told me to keep my head steady in there. Turns out I needed that more than you knew." Frank laughed, a warm, rumbling sound. "So that's why you called me down here? To say thank you?" "Partly," Malik said, "but mostly because I want you working here if you'll have it. Head of guest relations. You already know what real hospitality looks like." Frank's eyes went misty for a second before he covered it with a gruff cough. "Well, somebody's got to keep this place honest." He shook Malik's hand firmly, the grip of a man who had earned every callus on his palm. Then he grabbed his old duffel bag from the trunk and walked inside, ready for his first shift. Inside, changes came fast. New training signs appeared near every staff entrance, simple words printed in bold letters. Every guest deserves respect, no matter how they arrive. Sarah, the front desk clerk, kept her job, but not without a long conversation with Malik himself. He didn't yell. He simply asked her to picture Chloe's face every time a stranger walked through that door. Sarah never forgot it. Weeks later, Sarah stopped a tired traveler at the door, a young man in worn boots and a torn jacket. Instead of hesitating, she smiled and waved him toward the desk. It was a small moment, but it mattered. Leo settled into his new role fast. Within a month, staff across the hotel came to him first with questions. They trusted the same steady kindness that once made him kneel beside a crying child. Chloe visited the hotel often after that, always with Barnaby tucked under one arm. The staff came to know her by name. Some kept a small stash of chocolate bars behind the desk, just in case. News crews came asking for interviews, wanting the dramatic story of the billionaire in disguise. Malik turned most of them down. He preferred a quieter kind of impact, one built through change policies rather than headlines. Still, one local reporter managed to catch him near the lobby doors one afternoon. "Mr. Reynolds, why not tell your side of the story publicly? People would love to hear it." Malik paused, looking back toward the marble columns behind him. "The story isn't about me," he said. "It's about every person who walks through doors like these and just wants to be seen as human." The reporter had no response to that. She simply nodded and let him walk away. That evening, as the sun dipped low over Puget Sound, Malik and Chloe sat together by the tall window of the hotel's top floor. The sky burned orange and pink above the water. A warm mug of hot chocolate sat between them, steam curling up into the cool air of the room. Chloe wrapped both hands around her own small cup, the porcelain warm against her fingers. Chloe leaned her head against her father's arm, Barnaby resting in her lap, his torn ear catching the last light of day. "Daddy," she said softly, "I'm glad you didn't yell at that mean lady." Malik smiled and kissed the top of her head. "Sometimes the quietest strength is the strongest kind, baby." "Is Barnaby a hero, too?" Chloe asked, holding up the worn little bear. Malik chuckled, low and warm. "Barnaby held on tight the whole time. That makes him one of the bravest in the building." Chloe smiled, satisfied with that answer, and hugged the bear a little tighter. Down below, the marble lobby glowed under new light fixtures, softer now, less like a fortress and more like a home. Guests moved through the space freely, their laughter drifting faintly up through the floors. Malik thought about Harrison's warning back in Chicago, about the risk of stepping into his own hotel as a stranger. He understood now why that risk had mattered so much. He thought about Officer Miller, waiting for his hearing at the county courthouse. He thought about Cassandra, packing up a small apartment across town, her career in ruins by her own hand. None of that brought him satisfaction. It simply confirmed something he already believed. Systems built on cruelty always find a way to collapse under their own weight. She yawned and closed her eyes, safe and warm beside him. Malik looked out, over the water, watching the waves catch the fading light. He thought about Frank's words in the taxi, about the cold wind and the colder stairs. He thought about how far dignity could travel when someone finally chose to stand still and let the truth speak for itself. "We did it," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "We really did it, kid." Outside, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one, against the darkening sky. Boats drifted slowly across the dark water, their small lights bobbing like scattered stars. And inside that quiet room, high above the marble lobby, where it all began, a father and his daughter watched the day end in peace. The wind outside had turned gentle now, brushing softly against the glass, as if the whole city had finally exhaled.